friends, Sheila here. I've been bike touring for the last 5 years, and I've also in that time been working in a bike shop, and sometimes I also work as staff on supported bike tours. So I basically just do all things related to bike touring, bike packing. It's just my jam. And today I wanted to share the 5 most important things I have learned over the last 5 years of bike touring. So let's dig in. Number 1, there are as many ways to bike tour as people who do it. I am so grateful that there is more and more access to bike touring and bike packing information. I think, the fact that you can literally fill your Instagram or Facebook or YouTube feed with the adventures of other people and learn from them and, get this kind of information and inspiration from others, it's such a blessing. The one tricky thing that can come with this is that sometimes I think we can end up in a bit of a comparison game. But really, as long as, we're respecting the environment and the people and ourselves, there's no right or wrong way to bike tour. So for one, the amount of gear that each individual person needs is so varied. Somebody might really love to bring as little as possible to keep their bike as streamlined as possible and go as fast as possible. And on the flip side, there are people who want to, bring their guitar or their surfboard or their dog. And there's, every range of option in between, right? We're all on our own adventure, and however little or much gear we want to bring is completely unique to each individual person. And same thing with accommodations, for example. Some people might really love being out in the wild and doing a lot of wild camping, and some people might prefer to be in hotels, and some people might like doing both, right? It doesn't make your experience any, less valid or less wonderful based on whatever you choose. So I really think it's important to just do the trip that feels right for you and don't worry so much about what everyone else is doing. Number 2, your gear will never be perfect. Look, gear is important. We all need gear. We need a bike. If we're camping, we need a tent. We need clothing to wear. We need to protect ourselves from the elements. There's stuff we need. There's no disputing that. But what I often see, especially with folks who are starting out with bike touring, is it's really easy to get hyper fixated on the gear. And I think sometimes fixating too much on the gear can lead to a bit of decision paralysis, and it can ultimately keep us from heading out on a super cool adventure. So I guess it's a bit of a fine balance, because I think it can be really helpful to look at other people's gear lists and to see what other people are using and to do that research to pick out the stuff that we think is gonna work for us well. But for me, I found that eventually, I just needed to pull the trigger and do it. So when I decided to finally do my first dream bike tour, I kind of just cobbled everything together as best I could, because I couldn't afford all the best gear. I had to just start with what I could. So I borrowed some stuff, I got stuff secondhand, I used a lot of what I already had, but I found it was a lot easier to kind of just get started, use the gear I had, and figure out what I liked about it or didn't, and then, replace it when it was appropriate, but to not let, having the perfect gear keep me from having the adventure. I try to just kind of stay positive with whatever gear I have. It's not about the perfect gear, it's about having the perfect adventure for you, I think. Number 3 is to respect the weather. I think it's so interesting that when it comes to when I started bike touring and when it comes to the conversations I've had with a lot of people who don't bike tour, a lot of the fears and concerns are around, traffic and animal encounters and, people that might want to do us harm. And those get a lot of focus, but one thing that does not get nearly enough respect paid to it is weather. And I think probably a lot of that comes from the fact that many of us don't deal with extreme weather in our day-to-day lives, right? Like we're in these four walls, you know, many people have cars, so you go straight from your walls to your car, you know, we're protected from nature. And even if we happen to be out in a storm, you know, usually we can duck into a building or some kind of safe space and get out of the weather. And that isn't always the case when we're out bike touring. We are really exposed and vulnerable to the elements. So I've learned how important it is to do my research in terms of weather that I might encounter and to come prepared for that. So for me, it almost doesn't matter how hot a place I'm going is. I almost always still bring, you know, my down jacket and my full rain gear, you know, my raincoat, my rain pants, my waterproof socks. I have a whole video about rain gear that I'll link below, but especially because I find nights can be cold, the tops of mountains can be cold. So I basically always plan to be able to exist in really cold temperatures and also with rain, because when we get wet, it can make us colder. So I basically take those steps to avoid the risk of hypothermia. And on the flip side, with really hot conditions, now this is one I learned the hard way, which is that the heat is also not to be messed with. When I was in Turkey with my partner, our first day heading out, you know, I had biked in the summer plenty, so I thought I was okay with heat. But because, you know, getting all our gear together, by the time we headed out on our first day, I think it was about 11 a.m. And so we were basically heading out kind of peak heat. And we ended up in this big steppe with no shade. And I started to just experience some really serious heat exhaustion. It showed me pretty fast how important it is to take the heat seriously as well. And from that experience, I learned to usually, in hot conditions, I head out early in the morning. I try to take a break around midday when it's really peak heat, and then maybe continue on after that. And then there's also, you know, extreme weather conditions. Some places are more prone to earthquakes or wildfires or tsunamis or hurricanes. And so I always try to be aware of what kind of grave weather circumstances could be in a place and think about how I'm going to make sure that I am aware of those things and what I need to do to keep myself safe. I also don't mess with wind, extreme wind, you know, wind gusts, especially if I'm on, you know, challenging terrain or if I'm dealing with traffic, you know, anything that could make it hard for me to safely maneuver my bike. I will often just take a break and avoid super windy conditions. Also being mindful of, you know, lightning storms. Number 4, honor your body. This one is so important because I feel like with bike touring, right, we're going out on this challenge. Like, we know it's going to be a challenge. We're biking day after day, and we know we're challenging ourselves. And there's kind of this interesting fine line that I have found, which is, you know, being able to challenge myself, but also respecting my body, respecting my mind. And I think over the years, I've been able to listen to my body's cues and know when, you know, I might be feeling it a bit, but I can continue on and challenge myself and push through, or when it's just too much and continuing on would be risking injury or risking burnout, and that I really just need to, you know, take a break or change my route or take a couple rest days, but I really need to respect my body. I try to never let my ego run the show, and so just because, you know, I've committed to a certain route or thought I was gonna bike a certain amount of days in a row or kilometers or whatever it may be, if my body is telling me that we need to stop, I try to always just respect that, because I know over the long term, that's going to serve me better. And then a big one in terms of honoring your body is food and water, nourishment, hydration. And so making sure that I'm always, you know, fueling myself regularly, that I'm carrying lots of snacks and looking ahead in terms of, you know, future water sources and food sources and all that jazz. But yeah, you know, like, we're biking day after day, and it's our bodies and minds that let us do that. So, you know, we gotta respect them. Number 5, stay positive and keep it fun. I feel like such a nerd. But it's true. I try to always remember, right, this is not something we have to do. This is something we get to do and that we choose to do. And so, you know, even though I can get grumpy or hangry or whatever it may be, I try never to let that last too long. You know, for instance, with camping in the rain, I don't mind camping in the rain. I enjoy the sound of rain on the tent. But if I camp too many days in a row in the rain and I'm just soggy and all my gear's wet, and I have an opportunity to, you know, pay a little bit to stay in a hostel or a warm showers host and let my stuff dry out, like, that's great. You know, I don't have to rough it every single day. If I can take that day to relax and feel better and dry my stuff out, then that's awesome. And you know, if I have a couple days in a row that I'm just starting to feel fatigued and like I'm slogging along, then I'll take a rest day. This is a really fun thing we get to do. And so I try not to take it too seriously and to make sure I'm having fun and doing it my way and just having the adventure that I want to have. Even if I'm not as cool and tough as some people I see. I'm still pretty cool and tough, right? I'm cool and tough enough for me, I guess. Okay, those are the 5 things I have learned over my last 5 years of bike touring. I would love to hear what you have found to be the most important learnings. Definitely toss them in the comments below. If you want more bike touring tips, you can check out my Planning Your First Big Bike Tour workshop, which I will link below. And if you want to support my videos and get more videos and the behind the scenes scoop, then you can join me over on Patreon. Thanks so much for being here. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.